You can believe whatever you want, but every word of this is true. My name is Dakota Hayes, and somewhere between foggy sunrises over Lake Michigan and sleepless nights in an Austin-carrying space, I built my company, PulseMap. A year ago, a New York tech giant called Everline Technologies bought my company PulseMap for $7 million. For most people, that sounds like a dream. Millions in the bank, recognition in the industry, freedom to choose your path. But right at the moment when a Milwaukee radio announcer cheerfully said, "Our hometown girl sold her platform for millions and is now playing in the big leagues," my mom called me. That call changed everything. I was born and raised in the suburbs of Milwaukee, where summers smell like hot asphalt, fresh corn, and fish from the lake piers. My dad worked as an accountant at a small firm. My mom was an elementary school teacher. My younger sister, Avery, came into the world just over a year after me. If I was always the independent one, Avery was our sweet little girl. The difference was that everyone expected more from me, while even Avery's small achievements were treated like miracles. When I helped with chores as a kid, it was just expected. When Avery did the same, people clapped and cheered. At school, teachers would ask me to give her the computer for her projects, even though I stayed up late studying for competitions. At some point I realized being independent just meant they can always ask you for more. I found comfort in books and technology. At 12, I wrote my first program on a school computer. By 14, I begged my parents to buy me a used PC so I could practice more. They agreed, but with that cool tone, "You'll manage." That's when I decided fine, I'll manage, but on my own. Avery was the opposite. She made friends easily, lit up every party, and could talk for hours about her dreams. My parents constantly reminded me, "Help your sister with her homework. Let Avery borrow your jacket. She doesn't have anything to wear. You're stronger. Let her have it." And I did. But inside, exhaustion grew. When it came time for college, I chose Austin with its strong computer science program. For the first time, I felt like I could be more than the girl who handles everything. I landed an internship at Strata Forge, where I met Naomi Brock, a woman who became my mentor. She was tough but fair. One day she told me, "You've got a strong core, Dakota, but you'll have to build the muscles yourself." Back then, I didn't realize she meant not just in business, but in setting boundaries with family. My company PulseMap was born out of frustration with endless spreadsheets. I noticed small businesses didn't have an easy tool to understand where exactly customers dropped off in the buying journey. I built a prototype. My first deal was with an online store in Denver, the second with a coffee chain in Austin. Every time a client said yes, I cried with joy. Gradually, more clients came than my first employees, and soon we moved out of my apartment into a tiny office in a converted warehouse. It smelled like dust and hope. Then came the email from Everline. I was sitting in my kitchen, staring at a coffee-stained mug, when I read it. They wanted to buy my company PulseMap for $7 million. $7 million. It was more than I'd ever dreamed of. What with the excitement came fear. What now? Who am I without the struggle, without those endless nights in front of the monitor? We closed the deal at the start of summer. I walked out of the glass conference room, where the lawyers spoke in their flat, mechanical voices, and for the first time in a long while I felt empty. Naomi simply said, "Congratulations, tomorrow you start with a blank page." That evening, I turned on the radio for background noise and heard them talking about me. A local girl made it big, sold her company for millions. I smiled, but just then my phone lit up. The screen said, "Mom, Dakota, we're so proud of you," she said. "But your dad needs less stress. Come home. Let's talk." I flew back to Milwaukee. Dad met me at the door with a tired but genuine smile. Mom served cherry pie, my childhood favorite. Avery was glowing as she talked about her new apartment and plans for a creative future. At dinner, Dad raised his glass to Dakota, to our shared future. I froze for a second. Shout. Later, on my way to the kitchen for water, I overheard them talking. Dad's voice. 7 million of that's enough forever. Mom, she has to understand we're all in this together. Avery chimed in. If she pays off our loan, things will get easier. I stopped hand on the glass. My heart pounded so hard it felt like they must hear it in the next room. When I walked in, the room went silent. I asked, "Are you serious?" Nobody answered. But minutes later, Dad slid a folder across the table. The cover said, "Family Strategy." Inside were bullet points. Pay off my parents' mortgage. Create a monthly fund for Avery and her husband Mason. Invest in Mason's music project and cover the cost of renovating their apartment. The total was so high it knocked the air out of my lungs. My jaw literally dropped. I sat there unable to believe what I was seeing. And that was only the beginning. I sat there clutching the folder like it might bite me. Everything was printed neatly inside. Tables, graphs, bullet points, a monthly fund for your sister, investment in her husband's music project, it covered apartment renovations. It looked like a business plan, except the business was my money. Are you serious? My voice shook, though I tried to keep it steady. Dad leaned back in his chair. We're just thinking about the future of the family. 7 million is a huge opportunity. It's not just yours, it's ours. Mom nodded. You know your dad's health isn't perfect. His blood pressure keeps spiking. We all need to think about what will make life easier. Avery bit her lip. You've never understood how hard it is being the younger one, always in your shadow. Is it really too much to help us start our project? It'll be something for all of us. A wave of exhaustion and anger rose inside me. It's my money, I said. I worked nights. I took the risks. I built my company Pulse Map step by step. I'm willing to help, but on my terms. This no. Mom crushed her napkin into a hard ball. You're getting cold, Dakota. Family means support is support, I repeated, not blackmail. The conversation ended in heavy silence. I went to the guest room, shut the door, and sat in the dark for a long time. One thought kept circling in my head. Do they really believe I owe them? The next morning, I called Caroline Wu, the financial advisor I'd worked with during the deal. Be honest with me, am I a terrible person if I refuse? You know, she said calmly. You're not obligated to become a bank for your family. This is your capital, your work, but let's check what debts they actually have. I'll arrange an audit. I agreed. At least it would bring some clarity. A day later, back in Austin, a new blow hit me. The bank sent a notice, request to open a credit line with guarantor, Dakota Hayes. I froze. What guarantor? I hadn't signed anything. I called the bank. The rep's voice was firm. Yes, we have an electronic signature from Dakota Hayes guaranteeing refinancing of your parents' mortgage. Cold chills ran through me. I asked for copies of the documents and forwarded them to Caroline. An hour later she called back. Dakota, the documents do show your e-signature, but I checked the metadata and log files. It wasn't signed from your device or your account. It's a forgery, technically generated in your name. Legally, this is serious. We'll need lawyers. I called home. Dad picked up. What are these documents? I nearly screamed. A long pause. Then his voice. We thought you wouldn't mind. It's for us, after all. You forged my signature. You wanted to help. Mom cut in. I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles went white. You crossed the line. My lawyer and I canceled the deal, put blocks in place, set up alerts. But the feeling of betrayal didn't fade. I sat by the window in my Austin apartment, staring at the dark outline of the cliff outside the city, and thought, what next? If they've gone as far as forging my signature, where's the limit? A week later came another hit. On the morning broadcast of a local TV station, the anchor said, a local girl sells her startup for millions but refuses to help her own family. On screen, my old school photos, wide shots of the lake, Insider comments. A voiceover, she forgot who braided her hair. The ground fell out from under me. Who leaked details of the deal? The amount? Our family conversations? My phone blew up with messages. Don't forget who raised you. You owe your family. Your family is sacred. For the first time in my life, I shut down all my social media. I booked an appointment with Dr. Elaine, a family therapist a friend had recommended. At the first session, I unloaded everything: the forged signature, the family strategy folder, the TV broadcast. If I say no, does that make me a bad daughter? I asked. Dr. Elaine looked at me calmly. You're not a bad daughter. You're a person with the right to boundaries. When the usual forms of pressure stop working, manipulation escalates. That's normal. I nodded. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. But the story was only just beginning. A few days later, I got an unsigned letter. If you don't start paying your family, I'll publish your personal notes. Attached were screenshots of my old drafts of private pages where I'd admitted to fears and doubts. My whole body went cold. How? At the bottom it said, we guessed your security questions. Childhood dog, third grade teacher, you can't hide. I froze. Only my family would know those answers. A storm of horror and anger hit me. This wasn't just about money anymore. They had started blackmail. The laptop screen flickered like it was mocking me. Right in front of me were my own notes, fragments of thoughts where I admitted I was sometimes afraid of failure, that I felt like an outsider even among colleagues, that I wasn't sure I deserved any of this. Words I had left only for myself, no one else was ever supposed to see them. I was shaking as I reread the message. If you don't stop paying your family, I'll publish your personal notes. At the bottom, we know the answers to all your security questions. You can't hide. I leaned back in my chair, covering my face with my hands. So they hadn't just forged my e-signature. They had hacked into my old cloud account, where I kept backups. Who else would know the name of my first dog or my third grade teacher? Only family. One question kept spinning in my head. How could they? I called Dr. Lane. Her voice showed no surprise, no panic. She said, blackmail isn't about money. It's about control. They felt the old ways of pressuring you stopped working, so they found a new one. You need to build walls legally, technically, emotionally. We made a list of actions together. First step, cybersecurity. I called a contact at Eveline who used to work in digital security. He didn't ask questions. Change every password, turn on two-factor, drop security questions, use code generators only, shut down old clouds if they're not critical, and don't you dare respond to the blackmail. I followed his advice. I spent the night changing settings on every service, deleting archives, setting up security keys. At 2 a.m., I was sitting on the floor surrounded by my laptop and phone, feeling rude in my own home. The next day, my phone rang. On the screen, my sister's name. My stomach dropped. I answered. Are you reading our messages? Her voice was sharp. I am, I said. And I know it's you. Silence. Then a whisper. We're doing this for the family. If you love us, you'll understand. I closed my eyes. Blackmail isn't love, it's betrayal. You've always thought you were better than us. She snapped and hung up. 2 days later, another local TV story aired, this time with an anonymous source. A shadow, voice distorted. She forgot who supported her as a kid, who shared their last slice of pie. On screen, my school photos, shots of the lake, neighbors shaking their heads. I turned the TV off, sat on the couch staring at the wall. It felt like I was trapped in someone else's movie. The people I loved were painting me as a monster for the whole town to see. My phone blew up again. Some wrote, you owe your family. Others, don't give in, they're using you. I felt under siege. I decided to return to Milwaukee. Not to surrender, but to confront them directly. The house smelled of cinnamon and coffee, like nothing had changed. But at the table, the air was heavy with silence. "I know about the blackmail," I said flatly. "I know about my notes about the cloud." Avery flared up. "You think we're the enemy? We just wanted a little fairness. My voice rose. "Forging my signature, hacking into my private notes, that's fairness." Dad frowned. "Don't dramatize, we're family. Sometimes you have to take extreme measures." I looked at them and realized they truly believed what they were doing. To them, it wasn't a crime. It was fighting for the greater good. I left that same evening. On the train, I stared out at the black water of the lake. It felt like it was silently listening. Inside me, anger and pain fought for space. Back in Austin, I met with Caroline. She brought the audit results. "Dakota, I have to tell you the hard truth. Your sister and her husband have been taking out loans and stopping payments once the amounts got too high." I gripped the edge of the table. "So they're in massive debt?" Caroline nodded. "Unfortunately, yes." That evening, I sat on my balcony in Austin. The wind carried the smell of dust and gasoline. I stared at the horizon, at the dark silhouette of the cliff, and felt like I was standing on the edge of an abyss. "What would you do in my place?" I asked the empty air. No answer. But I knew the worst was yet to come. I felt the ground slipping from under my feet. It was like standing on the edge of a cliff while someone kept pushing me closer to the drop. Every new move from my family carried more pressure, more threats, more poison. If I didn't take control, they would crush me. I went back to Dr. Lane. She listened quietly while I spilled everything in a rush: my sister's debts, the reporters, my parents justifying everything with "we're family." "You have to understand," she said softly but firmly, "family can be a source of support or a source of pain. In your case, the second. The more you agree to play by their rules, the harder they'll press. You need a new rule. No secret talks, everything only through a lawyer or mediator, and no improvising." I listened and knew she was right. I had been trying to handle it myself for too long, giving in too often, thinking it was compromise. In reality, it was fuel for their pressure. But my family wasn't backing off. A week later, in Austin, a reporter called. His voice was cold, almost mechanical. "We're preparing a big piece. We have documents showing you owe your parents and sister millions. Do you want to comment?" My breath caught. "What documents?" "The financial reports. They were provided by people close to your family." I clenched my jaw. "Those documents are fake. The story's going live anyway," he said flatly and hung up. I stared at my phone, cold sweat running down my back. They weren't just pushing guilt anymore. They were fabricating evidence. I immediately called Caroline and my lawyer. We met that evening in her office. The place smelled of coffee and fresh paper, but the air was thick with tension. "This isn't pressure anymore," Caroline said. "It's a campaign. They want to break you publicly. But why?" I stared at my hands. "Why paint me as a monster?" The lawyer sighed. "Because they believe you'll cave under the weight of public opinion. For them, reputation is leverage. If neighbors, colleagues, the whole town whispers that you abandoned your family, they think you won't survive." For the first time, I fully understood just how far they were willing to go. The next day, the segment aired. I watched as the TV screen became a mirror, reflecting me as a monster. Documents with my name, graphs, red numbers. The anchor, voice grave. Sources claim Dakota Hayes refused to help her own family, despite owing them millions. My stomach dropped. Every word hit like a punch. My phone lit up with a flood of messages. Some, "How could you?" Others, "Don't give in. They're using you." I sat curled up on the couch, knees to my chest, trapped in a cage built from lies and someone else's words. Just then, Naomi, my former mentor, called. Her voice was steel. "Listen, you don't owe them explanations, and you don't owe the city, but if you stay silent, They'll speak for you. You have a voice. You sit. I'm scared, I admitted, my voice trembling. Fear is normal, but if you stay silent, fear becomes your prison. If you step out and speak the truth, that's the first step to freedom. Want me to help you prepare? I closed my eyes and nodded, though she couldn't see me. A few days later, I sat in a tiny radio studio. A red light blinked on above the mic. My heart pounded in my throat. I said, yes, I sold my company PulseMap for $7 million. Yes, I love my family, but I am not obligated to pay off someone else's debts or be a bank for my sister and her husband, and I will not tolerate forged documents and blackmail. The words came out firm, even though inside I was shaking. After the interview, I stepped outside, inhaled the hot Texas air, and for the first time in weeks I felt light. But the relief didn't last. That evening, Mom called. Her voice broke with tears. You humiliated us in front of everyone. How could you? I closed my eyes. How could I? You tried to paint me as a monster. We only wanted the best, she whispered, and hung up. I sat in silence. Something inside me snapped. The bridges were burning for good. That night, I couldn't sleep. I paced the apartment like a caged animal. Thoughts spun in circles. They had declared war. And it wasn't about money. Money was just the weapon. The real battle was for control. They wanted to own me through guilt, through fear, through public opinion. I stepped out onto the balcony. Austin slept while the wind chased dry leaves across the pavement. I stared at the horizon where the cliff loomed dark, and I felt like I was standing on the front lines. Once, I thought success would bring me freedom. Now it had become an anchor, a weight my family wanted to use to drown me. And I realized, if I didn't stop fighting back, they would destroy me. I picked up a notebook and pen. I wrote out a plan, lawyer, public statements, new security measures, support from friends and mentors. No more one-on-one talks. Everything through a third party. I closed the notebook and took a deep breath. Ahead was a trial not only legal, but moral. And I knew the real war was just beginning. I thought they had already crossed the line. But it turned out that was only the beginning. One evening my phone blew up with notifications. Headlines, photos of my sister in a hospital bed, posts from neighbors. Avery was in an accident. The family is desperate. Why isn't her successful sister helping? I froze. My fingers shook as I dialed Mom's number. She picked up immediately, her voice deliberately broken. Are you happy now? She got hurt because we couldn't pay for her treatment in time. If you'd helped, this wouldn't have happened. What? My head spun. Wait, an accident? What treatment? It's all over the news, she said, then hung up. I opened the local TV station's website. There was a photo of my sister on a stretcher. The caption read, talented young woman left without support. Wealthy sister isn't in a rush to help. I stared at the screen, feeling the ground drop from beneath me. Hours later, Naomi called. You realize this looks staged, right? Her voice was cold and precise. Too many coincidences. Cameras there immediately, articles out in seconds, comments already written. But the photo, I whispered. She's really in the hospital. Maybe, but the real question is how serious it is, or how much of this is a setup. The next day, social media exploded. People shared the hashtag #HelpYourFamily. Under every one of my posts, comments piled up. You abandoned your sister, her blood runs in your veins, and you're living in a luxury apartment in Austin. I slammed my laptop shut and almost smashed it against the wall. It felt like I was being cornered by the screams of a crowd. I decided to fly back to Milwaukee. The hospital smelled of antiseptic. My sister lay in bed, a thin tube running to her Roman floor. She looked pale, fragile. Mom sat next to her and didn't even glance at me. See? Her voice was icy. This is what your greed caused. I stepped closer, my heart pounding. Then Avery opened her eyes and looked straight at me. And in her gaze, there was no pain, only challenge. Inside, I went cold. She was too calm, too composed for someone who had supposedly just been in an accident. "What's going on here?" I whispered. No one answered. That evening, I met with Caroline. "We checked," she said. "The accident happened, but it was minor. Your sister didn't suffer any serious injuries. The rest was staged. The stretch of photos were posed to make it look dramatic. The media ran with it because it was a juicy story. The rich sister refuses to help, and here are the consequences." I gripped the edge of the table. "So they staged a crisis just to put pressure on me." "Exactly," Caroline nodded. "And now you have to decide how to respond. If you start defending yourself, you're already in their trap." I left her office and wandered the streets for a long time. Storefront lights glare, people laughed, ate burgers, lived normal lives. And mine had turned into a theater of the absurd, where I'd been cast as the villain. I stopped in front of a shop window and saw my reflection. My face looked exhausted, but in my eyes, steel. Enough, I told myself. Enough playing by their rules. That night, for the first time in weeks, I slept peacefully. Because I realized, if they wanted to stage a show, then I'd have to learn to play tougher. Not with lies, but by making the truth louder than their lies. I woke up before dawn. The air in my apartment was cool and dry, the wind slipping through the window. Somewhere far outside the city, dust was already lifting off the cliffs. For weeks I had been living in constant anxiety, my phone like a siren, the news like a scream, messages like tiny needles. But this morning was different. Inside me there was an unfamiliar silence. I knew what I had to do. First, the simple steps, but firm ones. I wrote a short public statement, no complaints, no mudslinging, no family drama. Just facts. I sold my company Pulse Map for $7 million, true. I never promised my family monthly support, true. I never transferred money or signed commitments, true. I won't take part in staged dramas or blackmail, true. I added my lawyer's contact info for anyone who needed comments. And then I hit publish on the radio station's website where I'd given my last interview. If they wanted to play loud, I would answer with clarity. By noon, my lawyer had sent letters to the TV station and every outlet that spread the gossip. The tone was professional, no hysteria, a demand to retract false stories, screenshots of forensic checks, time-stamped blogs, expert opinions. "We're not asking, we're demanding," he said, and the steel in his voice steadied my own. Dr. Lane suggested one last attempt, a mediated meeting with my family to put an end to this. If they refused, then that would be it. I agreed. We rented a room in downtown Milwaukee for 2 hours, 4 chairs, 1 table, bottled water. Very American, very empty. I came early instead, out my hands for a while they went shaking. Mom came in first, eyes down, sitting opposite me. Dad followed, face tight, eyes stubborn. Avery entered last, her arm neatly bandaged, her expression carefully balancing fragility and accusation. I sighed. The silence was so heavy I could hear a bubble rise in the plastic water bottle. "I'm glad you came," I said. My voice was steady and I surprised myself. "This will be short. I love you. But I'm not an ATM or an insurance policy for every choice you make. I'm not transferring money, I'm not signing promises, and I'm not taking part in fake stories, not ever." Avery sneered. "So you'll just watch while we suffer. If you're in trouble, you go to doctors, to lawyers, to work," I answered. "Not to my bank account and not to the TV cameras. What you pulled with that accident was low." Dad narrowed his eyes. "We did what we had to do, and we'll keep doing it." Mom whispered, "Family helps family." Dr. Lane spoke quietly, almost gently. "Family helps, yes, but help and control are different things. This is control." I opened the prepared envelope. Inside was a single page. Boundaries and rules. No media involvement. No shared financial strategies. If my parents needed occasional health support, only with medical documents, only through the lawyer, only within reason. No transfers to my sister and her husband, no funding dreams or creative projects. All communication through a mediator. If the rules didn't work for them, contact ends. Simple. On paper. Dad smirked. So this is an ultimatum. These are my boundaries, I said. The only way not to destroy each other completely. Avery shoved her chair back. No paperwork, you just want to keep us on a leash. No, I said. I just want your hands off my throat. Silence covered the room again. Mom wiped her eyes without a sound. Dad stared stubbornly at the table. I pushed the page across and stood. Think about it. You have a week. If you don't come back with agreement, this is the last meeting. I stepped into the grey hallway and breathed deeply. The air smelled of dust and cheap air freshener. But somehow, in that smell there was a trace of freedom. The week dragged like a wet rope. During that time, the TV station quietly published a correction, a short, unnoticed line on their website, like a shy apology to themselves. No one said sorry out loud on air, but a journalist privately promised to check sources more carefully. It was enough for me. Not because justice was restored, it can't be restored with a single sentence, but because I stopped expecting it from people who don't know how to give it. On the third day, Naomi called. I saw your post. Clear. Stay the course. How do you feel? It's been worse, I laughed. But right now, like I'm finally staring. That's exactly it, she said. And don't forget, you're doing this for more than just the fight. She knew what she meant. I had started teaching coding to girls again on Sundays at the small community center in South Austin. The room smelled of cheap paint and coffee that was way too sweet. The girls stared wide-eyed, asking how web form works, how to find a bug in a loop, how to come up with ideas when it feels like everything's already been invented. Every time I explained something, it was like pulling a splinter out of my throat. My story didn't have to end where someone else's blackmail began. On the 7th day, I got a letter. Not a call, not another hysterical social media blast. A plain white envelope in Mom's familiar handwriting. Inside, one short note: we cannot agree to your terms. It's against our nature, be happy. No signature, no we love you, no sorry. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the paper like it was the period at the end of a very long sentence. And I felt light. We had put everything in its place. I was no longer a debtor in someone else's ledger. I wrote a reply, short and honest. I'm sorry it's this way. If you ever want to talk through a mediator, I'll be here. If not, I'll keep the silence. Take care of yourselves. For the first time in a long while, I had written to people I love without trying to convince them of something they weren't ready to hear. Time sped up. Weeks passed while we wrapped up the legal mess. My lawyer collected recordings, papers, letters, filed them neatly away. Caroline tightened my financial hygiene, extra security keys, revoked powers of attorney, glass walls around everything important. Naomi, as always, gave blunt advice. New project, yes, but rebuild the muscles that hold up your heart first. I laughed this time, not just the business muscles. She nodded. Exactly. One Sunday, after class at the community center, a girl in a blue hoodie came up, shifting nervously from foot to foot. Is it true they bought your startup for a huge amount? It's true, I smiled. But more important is that I had to build it first. I want to make my own too, she said seriously. But my dad tells me it's not for girls. It's for anyone who doesn't give up, I told her. No matter who you are, want to try together? She nodded so firmly it felt like we'd already conquered the peak. I caught myself thinking about peaks again, and not mountains, none around here, but the cliff outside the city where the wind pulls at your hair and teaches you to balance. Maybe that's what adulthood really is, standing where it's scary and not letting someone else push you into the abyss. I didn't hear from my family again. Occasionally, Small jabs surfaced in local forums, or someone sent me a screenshot, "The rich forget ordinary people." I didn't reply. The hands on my neck had let go, not out of shame, but because when there's nothing to grab onto, there's nothing to hold. Time passed, and I finally returned to the blank page I'd promised myself. No big PR, no press releases. I sat down at the table, pulled out a notebook, and wrote at the top, "What do I want to build when no one is pulling me back?" The answer came quickly: a platform to help small teams build analytics dashboards and learn from their data without drowning in it. The second line surprised me, and a support system for women founders, where we share not only knowledge but also how to hold boundaries. I smiled. This time, my project wouldn't start with trying to please someone. It would start with a real need in mind and of those walking the same path before and after me. At the end of summer, I went to Milwaukee alone. No calls, no warnings. I sat by the lake, where the water smelled of algae and old wood, and watched the waves crash stubbornly against the concrete shore. Behind me, the city. Ahead, the smooth line of the horizon and the sky street of moving clouds. I hadn't come to forgive or to beg. I had come to mark the point, the one after which I go forward. I pulled out my phone and texted Dr. Lane. For the first time, I did expect them to make the first move. She replied a minute later, "That's freedom." I turned off the screen and just sat there. The warm wind touched my cheeks, and inside me, there was quiet. I know my story may sound cruel to some. How could you? It's family. But family isn't a draft ledger where you write in someone else's numbers. Family isn't an excuse to forge signatures or drag cameras through hospital halls. Family is a space where you can say no and hear, not threats, but we understand. And if that space doesn't exist, then you build your own version of family. A mentor who won't betray you. A friend who shows up at midnight with coffee. A group of girls who come to the center on Sundays and aren't afraid to ask questions. Or maybe just yourself finally giving yourself permission not to rescue those who don't want saving, who only want to drag you into someone else's war. On my way back to Austin, I looked out the plane window. A thin strip of ocean appeared as we turned, and it reminded me of something I had forgotten. The world is enormous. Bigger than one house, one story, one roll of your strong, carry more. And I have a place in it, not as someone's free insurance, but as a person who builds, stumbles, learns, loves, and moves forward. I close this story not because everything is perfect now. It isn't. The pain remains like a scar. Sometimes it aches with the weather, sometimes it itches. But a scar or skin that's grown back. Mine has grown back. And I will never again let anyone rewrite my boundaries, my decisions, or my values. What about you? If you were in my place, would you keep trying to work things out at any cost, or would you choose silence and firm rules even if it meant breaking away? Write in the comments. I really want to know how you see this choice. And if this story resonated with you, stick around. There will be more honest, tough, but real stories ahead. That's the end of today's story. Thank you so much for staying with me until the end. I'd love to hear your thoughts, so share them in the comments below. I truly enjoy reading what you have to say. If you'd like more, check out the full playlist linked in the description of this video. New real stories are on the way, and I'd love to share them with you. Hopefully, I'll see you next time. If this journey resonated with you, please hit subscribe and tap the bell so you'll never miss the latest stories. Thank you for listening.